This small, rusted piece of metal may look like nothing more than ancient junk, but it's not what you think. Beneath the corrosion lies something that shouldn't exist, a machine so precise, so advanced, that even modern scientists struggled to understand it. It's called the Antikythera Mechanism, and it shouldn't be possible. More than 2,000 years ago, someone built a device filled with bronze gears and intricate wheels. It could track the stars, the planets, even predict eclipses. For centuries, we believed such technology only appeared in the modern world. But this single artifact rewrote that belief. It forces us to ask, how did an ancient craftsman, without modern tools, create a computer of the heavens? If this was the only mystery, it might be dismissed as luck or a one-time genius lost to history. But it isn't. Across the world, pieces of impossible technology keep appearing. In the deserts of Iraq, a clay jar with a copper tube and iron rod was found. It looks simple, like a container for oil or wine. Yet when reconstructed, it produces electricity. Historians call it the Baghdad Battery. It suggests that ancient people might have known how to generate power nearly 2,000 years before electricity was discovered. And then there's Egypt. Deep in the quarries of Aswan, granite. Blocks show drill marks so smooth, so uniform, that even diamond-tipped tools today would struggle to match them. Circular cores cut through the hardest stones, perfect symmetry in every line. Were they carved by hand, or by something more advanced, machines we no longer remember? All these clues point to one unsettling idea, that the past was not primitive. It was complex, intelligent, capable of things we still don't understand. If these devices were truly made using advanced engineering, it changes everything. It means our ancestors were not simply learning to survive, they were rediscovering knowledge that had already existed once before. If this device wasn't made with primitive tools, but with techniques we can barely replicate today, it means our timeline is broken. It means there were civilizations far ahead of their time, or perhaps not entirely human in their wisdom. And that's the mystery. Were these inventions born from forgotten knowledge, or from something even older, something we're still not ready to believe? Troy's Lost Chronicle. For centuries, Troy was a story, a city of heroes, gods, and betrayal, sung by poets and preserved in verse. In Homer's Iliad, its walls rose high above the plains. Its gates guarded warriors whose names would echo through time: Hector, Achilles, Paris. But to historians for much of modern history, Troy was not real. It was myth, a grand fiction, woven to explain the Bronze Age's distant memories of war and pride. Until one day, the ground itself began to speak. In the late 19th century, a self-taught archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann arrived in northwestern Turkey with a shovel, a dream, and Homer's words in hand. Locals called the hill Hisarlik, a mound of earth overlooking the Aegean coast. Schliemann believed it hid the remains of Troy, the city of legend. His claim was met with ridicule. Scholars dismissed him as a romantic fool chasing stories. But in 1871, when his workers began digging through layers of stone and soil, they uncovered walls, massive, ancient, unmistakably human. And beneath those walls lay the shattered remnants of entire cities stacked one upon another, each built over the ruins of the last. 9 layers in all. 9 Troys, each with its own walls, streets, and temples. The deeper Schliemann dug, the older the city became. Bronze weapons, pottery, jewelry, and burnt brick told a story of centuries of destruction and rebuilding. The pattern was unmistakable. Troy had been destroyed again and again, by war, by fire, by time. At first, Schliemann believed he had found the Troy of Homer in the second layer from the bottom. He called the treasure he found there Priam's treasure, a hoard of gold and silver jewelry, cups and ornaments he believed once belonged to the king of the Iliad. But later excavations proved that this layer dated to around 2500 BC, nearly 1,000 years before the events Homer described. Still, even if Schliemann had misread the evidence, his discovery changed history. For the first time, myth had taken on the shape of stone. Troy, once dismissed as fantasy, had become a fact. Later, archaeologists continued his work. Wilhelm Dörpfeld, Schliemann's collaborator, refined the excavation and showed that the real Homeric city was likely Troy 6 or Troy 70, the 6th and 7th layers of Hisarlik, dating between 1700 and 1200 BC. These layers revealed strong fortifications, complex architecture, and signs of sudden destruction by fire and warfare. Charred debris, toppled walls, and arrowheads embedded in the ground suggested a violent end. Troy 7, in particular, showed a city under siege. Homes divided into cramped rooms, storage jars filled with grain, bodies left unburied. It looked like a city preparing for invasion and then falling to it. Around the same time, the Eastern Mediterranean world was collapsing. The Late Bronze Age, once connected by vast trade networks between Egypt, Mycenae, Anatolia, and Mesopotamia, was unraveling. Empires fell one by one, cities burned, and writing systems disappeared. It was during this time, around 1200 BC, that the War of Troy may have taken place. The ruins at Hisarlik reveal more than just warfare. They tell of a crossroads of civilizations. Artifacts found in Troy include Mycenaean pottery from Greece, Hittite-style seals, and Egyptian scarabs. This was not an isolated city, but a thriving center of trade linking east and west. Its wealth and strategic location near the Dardanelles, and the narrow strait connecting the Aegean to the Black Sea, made it both powerful and vulnerable. Whoever controlled Troy controlled trade, and whoever wanted that power would have had to take it by force. Yet beyond the swords and walls, there were quieter discoveries, hints that Troy was not just a fortress, but a city of record keepers. Among the ruins, scholars found clay tablets written in the Luwian language, a cousin to Hittite. These fragments suggest that the people of Troy may have had their own scribes, their own administrative systems. If so, the city once kept written records, treaties, inventories, correspondence, all long since lost. If they survived, they could reveal the true history of Troy, who ruled, who fought, and why it all ended in flames. But those records are gone, erased by centuries of war, fire, and rebuilding. What remains is legend, a story that survived because it was sung, not written. The poet Homer, writing nearly 500 years later, may have drawn from fading memories passed down through generations of storytellers. His words turned history into myth, and myth into immortality. Yet archaeological evidence now suggests his story was built upon a real foundation, a real war, a real city, a real fall. Still, not all scholars agree on what kind of war Troy faced. Some believe it was a siege by Greek city-states, perhaps a coalition of Mycenaean kings united against a rival trading power. Others think the destruction came from within, civil unrest or an earthquake that struck at the height of Troy's strength. But whether by man or by nature, the city's end was fiery and final. And then, like so many great civilizations, it was forgotten. In the 20th century, archaeologists like Carl Blegen of the University of Cincinnati returned to Hisarlik with better tools and methods. They found evidence that Troy 70 ended in a violent fire around 1180 BC, the same period that the Hittite Empire collapsed and the Sea Peoples ravaged the Mediterranean. It was a time of upheaval when knowledge, language, and order themselves were breaking down. Troy's fall was not an isolated tragedy. It was part of a storm that swept away the Bronze Age world. And yet, out of that silence, the story endured. Across centuries, the memory of Troy refused to die. The Greeks turned it into epic. The Romans claimed descent from its survivors. Medieval Europe made it a symbol of lost honor. Each era rewrote the story for itself. But beneath all the layers of poetry and pride, there was always something real. A city whose stones bore the heat of flames, whose walls once held the dreams of a people who lived and died at the edge of myth. Standing at Hisarlik today, among weathered ruins and windswept plains, the line between history and legend blurs. Archaeologists can measure the walls, analyze the pottery and date the ash, but they cannot restore what was truly lost. The thoughts, the language, the voices of those who built and defended Troy. Somewhere beneath the rubble might once have lain the tablets of a scribe, the chronicle of a city that saw its own end coming. Perhaps it was buried in the fire, or carried away by survivors who fled into the unknown. Troy's rediscovery taught the world a humbling lesson, that myths may not be lies, but memories. That sometimes the stories we dismiss as fantasy are fragments of forgotten history, waiting to be proven true. It reminds us that the past is not dead, only buried, and that every legend may still have bones beneath it. So as we look upon the ruins of the city once thought imaginary, the question lingers like smoke rising from the ashes. If Troy's history was rewritten once, how many other stories have we buried beneath the ruins? Ancient Green Sahara culture today, the Sahara stretches endlessly, a sea of sand and silence, lifeless and unbroken, except by the wind. But long ago, this desert was not a desert at all. Thousands of years before the first pharaohs rose in Egypt, before the pyramids or the Nile kingdoms, this land was green, alive with rivers, lakes, and grasslands. Beneath its dunes lie the traces of a forgotten world, a civilization that flourished where today no life can survive. Satellite images, archaeological digs, and fragments of rock art have begun to reveal a truth stranger than any myth. The Sahara was once a cradle of human innovation. Modern satellites have done what no ancient explorer could: see through the sand. What they've revealed is extraordinary. Hidden beneath hundreds of kilometers of dunes are the ghostly outlines of ancient riverbeds, lake basins, and delicate drainage systems, all part of a landscape that once supported millions of lives. Traces of massive paleo-lakes, like Lake Megachad, once among the largest bodies of fresh water on Earth, stretch across Central Africa. Between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was alive with life. Elephants, hippos, giraffes, and humans who hunted, herded, and built communities across what we now call wasteland. The discovery forced scientists to rewrite everything they thought they knew about where civilization began. Archaeologists have uncovered stone tools, grinding stones and pottery fragments buried in what were once riverbanks. These artifacts, dating back over 9,000 years, show clear signs of organized life. Near sites like Nabta Playa in southern Egypt and Tassili Niger in Algeria, researchers have found carvings, hearths, and burial circles that suggest ritual and planning. Nabta Playa in particular holds a structure of standing stones, aligned with the stars, older than Stonehenge. It marks solstices and seasonal rains, evidence of astronomical knowledge in use long before written history. These were not nomadic wanderers, but settled people who watched the skies, tracked time, and shaped their world according to patterns of the heavens. In the heart of the Sahara, ancient rock art tells their story in vivid color. Across cliffs and caves, thousands of carvings show a land alive with abundance, scenes of cattle herds, herders with bows, and families dancing beneath rain clouds. Painted in ochre and white, the figures show rivers filled with fish and boats gliding across long-lost lakes. One painting even shows giraffes drinking beside what must have been a fertile plain. It's a window into a vanished world, a civilization that thrived not despite the desert. But before it existed, evidence suggests that these early Saharan people were among the first pastoralists, herders who domesticated cattle and managed grazing lands. They made pottery long before Egypt's rise, and their tools display a steady technological evolution. Stone blades became sharper, polished axes replaced crude flints, and pottery styles grew more refined over time. In some sites, archaeologists have even found traces of grain residues and irrigation ditches, proof that they may have practiced early forms of agriculture. This was a culture capable of adapting to the rhythms of nature, creating technology suited to their environment. Then, slowly, it all changed. Around 5,000 years ago, the monsoon patterns shifted southward. The rains that once turned the Sahara green began to fade. The grasslands withered, the lakes dried, and the rivers turned to dust. One by one, the settlements were abandoned. The people who had lived there, the herders, farmers, and sky watchers, migrated toward regions that still offered water. Many likely moved east, following the Nile. There, the skills they had learned, farming, cattle herding, and perhaps even celestial observation, may have laid the foundation for Egypt's rise. The Nile's first settlers, it seems, may have been refugees from a dying paradise. Scientists call it the Green Sahara period, a time when Africa pulsed with life, creativity, and innovation. But to the people who lived it, it must have ended like a long, slow apocalypse. Imagine watching your lakes vanish, your grazing land turn to sand, and your stars, once used to guide migration, become useless as the climate shifted forever. The desert grew, swallowing everything. Entire rivers disappeared beneath dunes. What we see today is only the tomb of what was once alive, and yet, even buried beneath meters of sand, traces of that world endure. At sites across Libya, Niger, and Chad, archaeologists have found stone settlements, cemeteries, and even fossilized animal remains, reminders of an ecosystem that shouldn't have existed here. Fossilized crocodiles and fish skeletons rest in dry basins, where no rain has fallen for millennia. Ancient shorelines are still visible from space, etched like scars across the desert floor. Every new discovery pushes the timeline of civilization in North Africa further back, closer to the age of myths. Could the people of the Green Sahara have influenced those who later built the pyramids and temples of Egypt? Many scholars now believe so. The transition from nomadic herding to agriculture, the observation of the stars, the worship of celestial cycles, all appear first in the Sahara, then reappear along the Nile. Even the orientation of early Egyptian monuments may trace its lineage to the same star patterns marked at Nabta Playa. If that's true, then Egypt's greatness did not rise from the Nile alone. It rose from a desert that once bloomed. The Green Sahara stands as one of history's greatest paradoxes. A world of lakes and rivers turned to desert, a cradle of innovation, erased by the very earth it once tamed. Each new satellite image reveals ancient landscapes that defy imagination. Vanished deltas, lost river networks, traces of human footprints fossilized in sand. These discoveries remind us that climate can give birth to civilization and destroy it just as easily. So we are left with a haunting question as we stare across endless dunes, knowing that somewhere beneath them lie the bones of forgotten farms, temples, and cities. If the Sahara once bloomed with cities, what else lies hidden beneath the dunes? Petra's hidden water systems, rising from the rose-red cliffs of southern Jordan, Petra stands as one of the most breathtaking sights of the ancient world, a city carved directly into stone. Once hidden from the world, it was rediscovered in the 19th century by Western explorers who could hardly believe their eyes. Grand temples, tombs, and facades shimmered in shades of crimson and gold under the desert sun. But beneath the beauty of Petra lies an even greater mystery. How did this magnificent city thrive in one of the driest, harshest environments on Earth? The city's very existence defies logic. Petra sits in a desert valley with no major river nearby, surrounded by cliffs that capture almost no rainfall. Yet 2,000 years ago, it was a bustling metropolis, home to tens of thousands of people, a trading hub that connected Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean. Its survival depended on one thing: water. For centuries, historians wondered how the Nabateans, the civilization that built Petra, managed to sustain such life amid the barren wilderness. The answer, uncovered through decades of archaeological work, is nothing short of astonishing. Hidden within Petra's cliffs and canyons is a network of water systems so advanced that it rivals modern hydraulic engineering. Archaeologists have discovered miles of carved channels, ceramic pipelines, stone conduits, and underground cisterns, all designed to capture, control, and distribute every drop of water that fell in the surrounding hills. The system was not random. It was planned with mathematical precision. The Nabateans redirected flash floods from distant wadis, dry riverbeds, into their reservoirs, controlling the flow with sluices and dams. This ensured a steady supply of clean water even during months of drought. Some of the channels carved into the rock walls still carry traces of plaster used to seal them. Waterproofing technique that prevented leakage. Others include small holes and expansion joints that allowed the water to flow smoothly without cracking the channels. Engineers have found stone pipes with exact gradients, designed to maintain steady pressure and prevent erosion. In some cases, the Nabateans even created pressure regulation systems, allowing them to bring water down steep slopes without destroying their pipelines, a concept centuries ahead of its time. But perhaps the most remarkable feature lies beneath the surface. Petra's engineers built hidden reservoirs and filtration chambers, some still intact today. These underground chambers filtered sand and debris from the incoming water, keeping the supply clean. During flash floods, a deadly danger in desert canyons, the same system diverted the excess flow into protected basins, preventing destruction while replenishing reserves. It was a feat of environmental adaptation so sophisticated that modern engineers studying it still marvel at its efficiency. The Nabateans turned Petra into an oasis. Gardens, fountains, and lush courtyards once dotted the city, watered by their secret channels. Imagine standing there 2,000 years ago, surrounded not by dry rock, but by green terraces, cool air, and flowing water cascading down carved stone troughs. Travelers from faraway lands describe Petra as a miracle, a city of abundance rising from the desert's heart. They traded spices, silk, and incense along routes that stretched from India to Rome, and the city flourished, all because of the genius of its engineers. Modern archaeological surveys have revealed just how vast the system truly was. Using drones and 3D mapping, researchers have traced Petra's hydraulic network, stretching across kilometers of canyons. Some of the conduits were connected to mountain catchments, allowing the city to harvest rainwater from high elevations. Others led to storage tanks buried beneath the streets, keeping the water cool and safe from evaporation. Incredibly, when modern experts reconstructed parts of the system, they found it still worked after 2 millennia. The ancient design, carved from solid rock, had endured time better than many modern constructions. What's even more mysterious is how the Nabateans developed this knowledge. There are no surviving texts or blueprints explaining their techniques. Their language, carved into inscriptions, left us with poetry and prayers, not engineering manuals. And yet, their understanding of hydrodynamics, pressure control, and environmental design seems almost scientific. Some scholars suggest they inherited ideas from earlier civilizations like the Mesopotamians or Egyptians. Others believe their genius was homegrown, the result of centuries of experimentation and adaptation in the harsh desert. The fall of Petra came not through war, but through shifting trade routes and natural disaster. As commerce moved to the Red Sea, the city's lifeline withered. Earthquakes damaged its water channels, and its population slowly vanished. The desert reclaimed the city, burying its secrets in sand and silence. For over 1,000 years, Petra lay forgotten, until explorers stumbled upon it in the 1800s, its temples still glowing in the fading light. Today, what remains of its water systems continues to astonish. Engineers who study Petra speak of it not just as an ancient wonder, but as a model of sustainable design, a blueprint for how humanity can live in balance with extreme environments. The Nabateans mastered the art of water management with nothing more than stone, clay, and ingenuity. Their channels still whisper across the cliffs, carrying the memory of a civilization that turned scarcity into abundance. Petra reminds us that advanced technology does not always mean machinery or electricity. Sometimes it means understanding nature so deeply that you can bend it without breaking it. The Nabateans didn't fight the desert. They worked with it. They carved their survival into the mountain itself, and in doing so, they left behind a mystery that humbles even our modern age. So, as we walk through Petra's silent canyons and trace our fingers along the smooth grooves of ancient water channels, one question lingers above all others. How did a desert city master water control we still struggle to replicate today? Silla's golden crowns in the rolling green hills of Gyeongju, South Korea. Once the capital of the ancient Silla kingdom, archaeologists unearthed treasures that shimmered like sunlight itself. Among the burial mounds of kings and queens, they found objects so intricate, so impossibly delicate, that even modern craftsmen struggle to replicate them. They were crowns, forged of pure gold, adorned with jade and tiny ornaments shaped like trees and deer antlers. But these were not ordinary royal symbols. Their design, geometry, and craftsmanship hinted something far more mysterious, a knowledge that may have blended spirituality, art and technology in ways still not fully understood. The Silla kingdom, one of Korea's three kingdoms, flourished between the 1st century BCE and the 7th century CE. It was a time of extraordinary cultural and technological growth, when Korean artisans mastered the art of metallurgy long before industrial tools existed. The royal tombs of Silla, known as tumuli, were sealed chambers made of stone and earth, untouched for more than 1,000 years until modern excavations began in the 20th century. Inside them, archaeologists discovered a world frozen in gold, belts, rings, earrings, and above all, the magnificent golden crowns that would redefine our understanding of early Korean craftsmanship. These crowns are unlike anything else from the ancient world. Each is made of ultra-thin gold, hammered to near transparency, some parts less than a millimeter thick. The crowns were built in multiple layers, a base band encircling the head, vertical tree-like extensions rising upward, and branching antenna-shaped prongs that reach toward the sky. Delicate chains dangle from the sides, each ending with small golden discs that shimmer like drops of sunlight. The entire piece seems to glow, even in the dim light of a museum case. But their fragility raises a question. Were these crowns ever meant to be worn, or did they serve another, deeper purpose? Scholars have long debated the symbolism behind the Silla crowns. The tree-shaped extensions may represent the world tree, a spiritual bridge between heaven, earth, and the underworld, a motif found in shamanic traditions across Central Asia and Siberia. The antler-like branches could symbolize divine connection, echoing the belief that kings were intermediaries between humanity and the gods. Yet some modern researchers notice something else: the resemblance between these golden forms and antenna structures used in early electrical technology. The precise symmetry, the consistent spacing between branches, and the repetition of geometric patterns all seem too deliberate to be purely ornamental. Of course, the Silla people had no known concept of electricity or resonance as we understand it today. But what if these designs were based on natural observations of lightning, magnetism, or the transmission of sound and energy through air and metal? Some have suggested that the crowns might have been ceremonial amplifiers, used in rituals involving vibration, music, or voice. When worn, their tall, branching forms would catch the wind and sunlight, perhaps even producing faint resonant tones. Others see the crowns as cosmic diagrams, visual representations of the universe's structure, encoding knowledge of astronomy or geometry passed down through trade with other ancient cultures. The Silla kingdom was far from isolated. Gold from their crowns has been chemically traced to sources that stretch across Eurasia. Archaeological evidence suggests that trade routes connected Silla to China, Persia, and even the distant Mediterranean world. Glass beads from Rome, silk from China, and patterns reminiscent of Scythian and Greek design have all been found in Korean tombs. The presence of such artifacts hints at a global network of ideas, a web of artistic and scientific exchange long before the Silk Road reached its height. Could the Silla artisans have absorbed distant influences, merging them into their own symbolic language of metal and light? The crowns themselves also reveal a mastery of materials bordering on the impossible. To hammer gold into sheets that thin without tearing requires control at the microscopic level, a feat even modern tools replicate only with difficulty. The metal was cut with precision tools and joined seamlessly without soldering, using techniques lost to time. The jade ornaments, shaped like commas and known as gogok, are polished so perfectly they seem almost machined. Every curve, every pattern, every minute cut suggests not random artistry, but deep understanding, perhaps even knowledge of vibration, frequency, and structure that modern historians overlook. And then there is the mystery of how such fragile crowns survived the centuries. Buried deep in sealed tombs, protected from air and moisture, they remained untouched until rediscovery in the 20th century. When light first struck them, after more than 1,000 years, the gold still gleamed as if newly forged. Some crowns were found in pairs, one made entirely of gold, another of gilded bronze, as if the Silla people understood the symbolic balance between permanence and decay, spirit and matter. For the Silla, gold was not merely wealth, it was divine essence. It represented purity, immortality, and the light of heaven. The crowns, then, may have served as more than royal regalia. They might have been instruments of transformation, worn during rituals to connect the ruler's spirit with celestial forces. Some researchers have proposed that when sunlight hit the crowns, the reflected light patterns could have created dazzling visual effects, a shimmering halo that would have made the wearer seem otherworldly, glowing like a god before the people. Even now, these crowns continue to confound scholars. Were they purely spiritual symbols of kingship? Were they inspired by nature and the cosmos? Or could they reflect some lost understanding of resonance and energy hidden within the language of ancient art? The truth remains out of reach. Each new examination, each scan and analysis only deepens the mystery. In the museums of Seoul and Gyeongju, the golden crowns of Silla rest quietly behind glass. Visitors lean close, their reflections merging with the metal that once crowned ancient rulers. In their mirrored shapes, we see not just beauty, but the echo of something greater, the human desire to reach beyond what is visible, to connect heaven and earth through creation. The Silla crowns remain both symbol and question, brilliant, fragile, timeless. And as their golden branches catch the light, one can't help but wonder, were these ornaments mere decoration or ancient devices in disguise? Zheng He's voyages in the early 15th century, when much of the world still believed the oceans were endless and filled with monsters, China had already conquered the waves. Under the Ming dynasty, a single man led one of the greatest maritime expeditions in human history. Admiral Zheng He, a Muslim eunuch born in Yunnan, who rose to become the commander of China's imperial fleets. Between 1405 and 1433, Zheng He sailed across the known world, and perhaps beyond it, commanding ships so vast and advanced that European sailors of the same era could only dream of them. His voyages revealed an empire that had mastered navigation, shipbuilding, and global diplomacy centuries before the Age of Discovery. And yet, almost as suddenly as it began, that age vanished. Leaving behind mysteries historians are still trying to understand. Zheng He's armadas were not fleets in the European sense. They were floating cities. His treasure ships, or beoquan, were said to measure up to 400 feet in length, nearly 5 times longer than Columbus's Santa Maria. Each carried hundreds of men, cargo holds filled with silk, porcelain, and spices. and towering masts that reached toward the heavens. The fleet may have included more than 300 ships and 28,000 sailors, a logistical achievement unmatched until modern times. When they appeared on the horizon, local rulers and traders across Asia and Africa saw not mere travelers, but a nation at sea. The purpose of these voyages was not conquest, but connection. Zheng He was sent by the Yongle Emperor to announce China's power to the world and to establish tributary relations with distant kingdoms. His fleet sailed from Nanjing and reached Southeast Asia, India, Arabia, and the eastern coast of Africa, a route stretching across more than half the globe. At every port, Zheng He left behind gifts, envoys, and records. In return, foreign rulers sent tribute, gold, spices, and even exotic animals. One of his most famous gifts to the emperor was a giraffe from the African kingdom of Malindi, presented as a symbol of heaven's harmony. But behind these diplomatic triumphs lay a staggering level of engineering sophistication. The Chinese shipwrights who built Zheng He's fleet used watertight bulkheads, compartmentalized hulls, and balance rudders that allowed enormous ships to maneuver smoothly across open waters. These innovations would not appear in Europe for centuries. Even more impressive were their navigation tools. Magnetic compasses, astrolabes, and meticulously detailed star charts guided the sailors across thousands of miles of open ocean with uncanny accuracy. Records describe their ability to measure latitude by observing the stars and to adjust their courses using environmental signs like cloud patterns and the color of the sea. Some historians believe that the Chinese sailors also used a type of longitude calculation, long before the West developed marine chronometers. Their maps, like the mysterious Cangnido map of 1402, depict parts of the world that were supposedly unknown to China at the time, including the outlines of Africa and even faint hints of the Americas. Later, a controversial 18th century copy known as the 1418 map claimed to show the entire globe, including coastlines of both North and South America. Though historians debate its authenticity, the question remains: how could cartographers of that era draw lands that no known Chinese expedition had officially reached? Some theorists argue that Zheng He's fleets may have traveled farther than the official records admit. Fragments of oral traditions, unexplained artifacts, and even ancient anchors found along the East African coast hint at voyages that may have crossed the Atlantic itself. Others propose that the admiral's navigators were using older maps, remnants of a lost maritime knowledge from earlier ages, perhaps inherited from civilizations that mapped the stars and oceans long before recorded history. Could Zheng He have been retracing routes known to forgotten sailors, carrying forward ancient knowledge that had already circled the globe? What is certain is that his voyages marked the height of China's maritime age, a moment when its technological and navigational prowess reached levels the rest of the world would not match for centuries. Yet in an extraordinary twist, that age ended almost as quickly as it began. After Zheng He's final voyage in 1433, China's rulers abruptly ended all major seafaring expeditions. The shipyards were dismantled, the great ships left to rot, and maritime records were destroyed. Officially, the empire turned inward, forbidding overseas trade and exploration. Within a generation, the memory of Zheng He's fleet had faded, an entire oceanic empire forgotten by the very nation that created it. Historians still debate why. Some cite a political struggle, conservative Confucian officials who viewed maritime trade as corrupt and dangerous to imperial order. Others point to economic exhaustion or the rise of new threats along the northern borders. But the result was the same. The world's greatest fleet vanished, and with it, centuries of maritime science. When European explorers set sail in the late 1400s, they did so in the shadow of a forgotten Chinese age that had already mapped the world. Today, archaeologists and historians are piecing together Zheng He's legacy from shipwrecks, inscriptions, and scattered documents. His story has become a mirror to history's deeper mystery, how knowledge rises, flourishes, and then disappears, leaving only questions in its wake. His voyages proved that the ancient world was far more connected than once believed. But they also remind us that progress is fragile, that even the greatest civilizations can lose their way. Standing at the port of Nanjing, where Zheng He's ships once launched into the unknown, one can still imagine the sound of drums, the roar of sails, and the promise of discovery carried on the wind. The world he mapped has changed beyond recognition, but his question remains as haunting as ever. If Zheng He mapped the world centuries early, whose maps did he follow? Angkor's hydraulic collapse hidden deep within the jungles of Cambodia lie the ruins of Angkor, once the heart of the mighty Khmer Empire, a city so vast and advanced that it rivaled the greatest capitals of the medieval world. To visitors today, Angkor is a place of haunting beauty. Sprawling stone temples overtaken by roots, silent faces of ancient kings gazing through the trees, and towers that reach toward a forgotten sky. Yet what made Angkor extraordinary was not only its architecture or art, it was its mastery over one of nature's most difficult forces, water. For centuries, the Khmers transformed a tropical wilderness into a perfectly tuned machine of hydraulic engineering. And when that balance broke, their civilization vanished almost overnight. The Khmer Empire flourished between the 9th and 15th centuries CE, covering much of modern Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. Its capital, Angkor, was not just a city, it was a masterpiece of environmental design. At its peak, Angkor supported nearly 1 million people, an astonishing number for its time. To sustain such a population in the humid and unpredictable climate of Southeast Asia, the Khmers developed an intricate network of reservoirs, canals, and embankments, one of the largest hydraulic systems in human history. These barrays, enormous artificial lakes, and their connecting channels were more than water storage. They formed a living system that distributed irrigation, managed floods, and even moderated the region's temperature. The east and west barrays, each several kilometers long, could hold millions of cubic meters of water. They were fed by rivers and monsoon rains, with carefully engineered canals directing the flow toward rice fields and city reservoirs. The system worked like a beating heart, absorbing excess water during floods and releasing it during dry seasons. For centuries, the rhythm held steady. The fields produced rice in abundance, the temples of Angkor Wat and Bayon rose in splendor, and the empire thrived. The Khmers turned nature into an ally, mastering the tropical environment in a way that seemed almost impossible. The entire city was organized around water. Sacred ponds mirrored the heavens, canals aligned with cosmic geometry, and the king himself was seen as the divine guardian of balance between heaven, earth, and rain. The empire's technology and spirituality were one and the same, but perfection can be fragile. Over time, the same system that gave life began to strain under its own complexity. Sediment slowly built up in the canals, the delicate embankments clogged with silt and vegetation. Monsoon rains grew unpredictable, sometimes too weak, sometimes too strong. By the 14th century, climate change began to take its toll. Studies of ancient tree rings and lake sediments show that the region experienced cycles of severe drought, followed by catastrophic floods. The Khmer's irrigation system, once the marvel of Asia, could not adapt fast enough. In recent years, LIDAR technology, a kind of laser scanning that penetrates the jungle canopy, has revealed the full scale of Angkor's engineering genius. Beneath the dense vegetation, archaeologists have mapped thousands of kilometers of hidden canals, reservoirs, and urban grids. The scans show precision planning, roads and waterways laid out with mathematical accuracy, entire suburbs connected by aqueducts. It was, in effect, a hydraulic city, centuries ahead of its time. Yet the same data also reveal how fragile that system became. As canals silted up and embankments collapsed, water could no longer be evenly distributed. Crops failed, famine spread, and the population began to disperse. The fall of Angkor was not sudden. like a kingdom crushed by invading armies. It was a slow unraveling, a collapse born from environmental imbalance and technological overreach. The very brilliance of its hydraulic system became its weakness. Each adjustment to fix the problem made the network more complicated, less stable. When the climate turned against them, even small miscalculations had devastating consequences. By the time the Ayutthaya kingdom from Siam invaded in the 15th century, Angkor was already hollow, a city drained of its lifeblood. Today, the remnants of the great reservoirs still shimmer in the Cambodian sun. Stone spillways and embankments snake through the forest, silent witnesses to a civilization that once mastered water with godlike skill. The canals no longer flow, but their outlines tell a story of vision and of hubris. Archaeologists now see Angkor as a cautionary tale, proof that technological brilliance cannot stand against the forces of nature when balance is lost. It is easy to look at Angkor's ruins and see only beauty, but behind those serene faces of stone lies a warning written in water and time. The Khmers understood the cycles of rain and drought better than any of their neighbors, yet even they could not foresee the slow turning of the Earth's climate. In the end, it was not war or greed that destroyed Angkor. It was the delicate web of its own perfection, collapsing under pressure. As we stand among the temples, listening to the hum of the jungle reclaiming its empire, we are left with the haunting thought that progress, no matter how advanced, always carries the seed of its undoing. Did Angkor fall from war or from its own technological limits? The Antikythera Mechanism. In the spring of 1901, the Aegean Sea was calm. A small group of Greek sponge divers set sail near the island of Antikythera, searching for sponges along the rocky seabed. What they found that day was not treasure, not coral, but something far stranger. As diver Elias Stadiatos descended into the depths, he spotted a massive bronze arm jutting out from the sand. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't a statue. It was part of a shipwreck, an ancient vessel lost for nearly 2,000 years. Scattered across the ocean floor were marble statues, amphorae and coins. But hidden among them lay something small and unremarkable, a lump of corroded bronze and wood, roughly the size of a shoebox. No one could have imagined that this fragile object would become one of the most mysterious discoveries in archaeological history. When the artifact was first brought to the surface, it looked like little more than rusted metal fused into rock. The divers assumed it was debris from the ship's cargo, perhaps a piece of navigational equipment or broken machinery. For years, it sat unnoticed in storage at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. But in 1902, an archaeologist named Valerios Stais happened to notice something strange as he cleaned one of the fragments. Beneath the corrosion, he saw the faint outline of a gear, tiny, precise, and completely out of place for something more than 2,000 years old. The discovery stunned the academic world. Gears of that complexity weren't supposed to exist in antiquity. The device was dated to around 100 BCE, yet historians believe true gear systems didn't appear until the invention of mechanical clocks in medieval Europe. More than 1,500 years later, the obvious question followed: who built it and how? At first, skepticism was widespread. Many dismissed it as a coincidence of corrosion or a misidentified fragment of a later object that had somehow mixed into the wreck. But as more fragments were examined, the truth became undeniable. X-rays revealed layers of interlocking bronze wheels, delicate inscriptions, and carefully aligned dials. Inside that small box was an entire network of miniature gears, over 30 of them, crafted with a precision that rivaled 18th century clockwork. It wasn't random metal, it was deliberate engineering. When researchers began to reconstruct it, the shock deepened. The gears weren't simply decorative, they were functional. Each one represented a mathematical relationship, ratios, cycles, and calculations that mapped the movements of celestial bodies. By turning a hand crank, the user could model the positions of the sun, moon, and planets across the sky. It could even predict lunar and solar eclipses. It was, in essence, an ancient computer, a machine that turned mathematics into motion. The realization left scholars speechless. How could such a thing exist at a time when most civilizations were still carving calendars into stone? The precision of the Antikythera mechanism suggested an understanding of astronomy and mechanics far beyond what history credited to the ancient world. The craftsmanship required knowledge of gear trains, tooth ratios, and mechanical design, concepts thought to have been discovered more than a millennium later. Modern studies using 3D imaging and advanced scans revealed even more details. On the device's surface were tiny Greek inscriptions, labels for dials, months, and celestial cycles. One dial tracked the Metonic cycle, a 19-year period that aligned lunar months with solar years. Another marked the Saros cycle used to predict eclipses. A smaller set of gears might have represented the movements of planets like Venus and Mercury. Even the moon's irregular orbit was accounted for. Through a pin and slot mechanism that simulated its variable speed, a level of sophistication so exact it rivals modern mechanical models. The deeper scientists looked, the stranger it became. The device wasn't just accurate, it was beautiful. Each component fit together with perfect harmony, the gears cut from solid bronze with uniform precision. It wasn't the work of trial and error. It was the product of knowledge and experience. Whoever built it understood both astronomy and engineering at an extraordinary level. Historians tried to trace its origins. Some linked it to the island of Rhodes, where ancient astronomers like Hipparchus had studied the heavens. Hipparchus himself was known to have developed geometric models to explain the motion of the moon, and the mathematics inside the Antikythera mechanism match his theories closely. Could the device have been built in his workshop or by one of his students? Others suggested the famed inventor Archimedes, who lived a century earlier, might have designed the prototype. Ancient texts describe similar machines made by Archimedes and other Greek scholars, devices that could display the motions of the sun and moon. But none of those writings ever hinted that such mechanisms actually survived. Until now, yet even with these clues, many questions remain unanswered. The craftsmanship of the gears is too advanced for the tools we know existed at the time. Bronze is hard to shape, and cutting perfect gear teeth requires both accuracy and machinery. Did ancient engineers possess precision lathes or cutting devices now lost to history? If so, where are the other examples? No similar mechanisms have been found anywhere else. The Antikythera mechanism stands alone, an orphan of technology with no known ancestors and no descendants. The shipwreck itself adds to the mystery. It was a Roman cargo vessel carrying treasures from Greece to Italy, likely around 60 BCE. Could the mechanism have been a prized possession of a scholar or nobleman lost at sea during transport? Or was it one of many such devices, traded among learned men who used them to study the cosmos? If there were others, they've all vanished, melted down, destroyed, or buried beyond recovery. Even after decades of study, the Antikythera mechanism continues to puzzle researchers. Some argue it represents the peak of Hellenistic science, a masterpiece of human ingenuity that was forgotten when empires fell and libraries burned. Others believe it hints at something deeper, that the ancient world reached levels of understanding we still underestimate. Could civilizations before Greece have mastered similar skills? Were there earlier models, perhaps from Egypt, Mesopotamia, or even older cultures whose records are lost? The most haunting idea is that the Antikythera mechanism wasn't a one-time miracle, but a remnant of a wider technological tradition erased by time. If that's true, then our history is incomplete. The device may be the last surviving whisper of a forgotten chapter in human knowledge, one that briefly illuminated the world before fading into myth. As the camera lingers on the corroded gears, the narrator's voice slows, The tone shifts from academic to reflective, the awe of the unknown settling in. This isn't just a machine. It's a message from across 2,000 years, carried by salt, stone, and silence. A reminder that human brilliance isn't linear. It flares, it fades, and sometimes it resurfaces in ways that defy logic. Scholars still debate who built it and why. Was it a teaching tool, a scientific instrument, or a divine model of the heavens made for a temple? The answers remain buried, locked behind corroded metal and missing pieces. Every few years, new scans reveal more inscriptions, more hints. But the full story continues to elude us. And so the question endures: how did ancient craftsmen design a precision machine centuries before clockwork existed? Did they possess tools and knowledge we've yet to rediscover? Or was this a glimpse of genius so far ahead of its time that it feels alien to us now? The Antikythera Mechanism sits in its glass case in Athens today, silent but powerful. Its gears no longer turn, yet it still moves minds and imaginations across the world. It stands as proof that history may not be a straight line from ignorance to knowledge, but a circle where lost brilliance waits beneath the waves, ready to remind us that the ancients were not so ancient after all. Ancients were not so ancient after all. The Baghdad Battery. In the late 1930s, during routine excavations near Baghdad, archaeologists uncovered a series of small clay jars buried among ancient ruins. At first glance, they look simple, unremarkable containers used for storing oils, scrolls, or perhaps grains. But inside one of these jars lay something unexpected: a rolled sheet of copper, carefully fitted inside the vessel, with an iron rod placed at its center. It seemed too deliberate, too precise to be random. When the pieces were studied more closely, scientists realized that this object, now famously known as the Baghdad Battery, might represent one of the most puzzling technological mysteries of the ancient world. The jar stood about 6 inches tall, sealed with asphalt, its mouth narrow and uneven. Inside, the iron rod showed clear signs of corrosion, as if it had once been submerged in an acidic or liquid substance. The copper cylinder surrounding it was equally weathered, yet fitted with purpose, its edges rolled neatly to create a hollow chamber. On their own, the parts seemed ordinary. Together, however, they formed a design eerily familiar to modern eyes, a structure that mirrored the basic components of a galvanic cell or battery. The realization sent a quiet shock through the scientific community. If this was truly a working battery, it predated the official discovery of electricity by more than 2,000 years. When replicas were built using the same materials, clay, copper, iron, and a mild acidic solution such as vinegar or lemon juice, they produced a measurable electric charge. The current was weak, only a few volts, but undeniably real. It was enough to power a small chemical reaction or create a slight tingling sensation on the skin. This simple experiment proved that whoever made the original jar understood, at least on some level, how to harness energy from chemical reactions. That discovery alone shouldn't have been possible in the ancient world. Electricity, as we define it, wasn't discovered until the 18th century. Yet here was an artifact that seemed to demonstrate the principle in its most basic form. The question, of course, is why? What purpose would such a device have served in ancient Mesopotamia? Several theories have emerged over the decades, each one trying to fit the mystery into known history. One popular explanation is that the Baghdad Battery was used for electroplating, coating objects like jewelry or statues with thin layers of precious metal. The process would have required a steady, low-voltage current, something these clay cells could provide. Supporters of this theory point to traces of silver and gold found on nearby artifacts and suggest the batteries were used in workshops by skilled metalworkers. Another possibility is that the jars had a religious or ritual function. Some scholars propose they were part of a sacred practice, perhaps used to create mild electrical sensations meant to symbolize divine power or to preserve scrolls, relics, or offerings in unusual ways. Electricity invisible yet powerful, would have seemed otherworldly to the people of that time. In temples or ceremonies, even a faint spark or shock could have been interpreted as a sign from the gods. Still, this explanation remains speculative, as no texts or inscriptions mention such practices. Others dismiss the electrical theory entirely. They argue that the so-called battery may have been nothing more than a storage jar, its components coincidentally arranged by time and decay. The copper cylinder and iron rod, they claim, might have originally served separate functions, perhaps as part of a scroll holder or a decorative fixture. The acidic residue found inside could be the result of natural chemical processes over centuries. Skeptics insist that calling it a battery imposes modern thinking on an ancient artifact that was never meant to generate power. Yet, the counter-arguments don't erase the evidence. Multiple replicas have confirmed that the Baghdad Battery can indeed produce electricity. The question is not whether it works, it does, but whether it was designed to work that way. If ancient craftsmen accidentally built an electrical device, that coincidence would be nearly as extraordinary as if they had done it intentionally. And if they did understand what they were creating, then history must be rewritten to include a civilization that played with the power of lightning long before Benjamin Franklin flew his kite. There are hints that the knowledge might not have been isolated. Some nearby artifacts show traces of plating that seem too precise to be applied by hand. Ancient writings from the region describe divine fire or spark of life, though it's impossible to know if these were poetic metaphors or descriptions of real experiments. Good ancient artisans have stumbled upon electricity through observation, perhaps while working with metals and acidic substances. Could they have learned to capture it even briefly without truly understanding its nature? The Baghdad Battery sits quietly today in the National Museum of Iraq, surrounded by relics of empires long gone. It's small, unimposing, easy to overlook, but the questions it raises are enormous. If this was a working battery, then ancient engineers knew how to generate and possibly use electrical energy 2 millennia before modern science rediscovered it. If so, what else might they have known and lost? Each theory, whether scientific or spiritual, only deepens the mystery. Was it an early experiment in chemistry, a forgotten craft of metal workers, or a relic of knowledge handed down from an even older civilization? The simplicity of its design hides the weight of its implications. A clay jar, a copper tube, an iron rod, together. They might represent a moment in time when human curiosity brushed against the edge of invisible power. And so, as scholars continue to debate, the same question lingers like a spark waiting to ignite. If they knew electricity 2,000 years before modern science, where did that knowledge go? The pyramid's energy hypothesis. For centuries, the Great Pyramid of Giza has stood as one of the most enduring symbols of human achievement. Massive, perfect, and timeless. Yet beneath its familiar image of stone and shadow lies a deeper mystery, one that challenges our understanding of what the ancient Egyptians truly built. The Great Pyramid is aligned almost perfectly to true north, so precisely that even with modern instruments, such accuracy is difficult to achieve. Its sides deviate from cardinal directions by less than a fraction of a degree. The entire structure reflects a level of astronomical and mathematical precision, far beyond what traditional history credits to the ancient world. How could builders working with copper tools and ropes have achieved such flawless orientation? When scientists and engineers examined the internal design of the pyramid, they found it was not just a pile of limestone blocks, but a structure filled with intricate chambers and narrow shafts, each angled and positioned with purpose. These passageways, especially the so-called air shafts, do not lead to the outside in random directions. Instead, they align with specific stars and constellations that held great meaning in Egyptian cosmology. The king's chamber, the queen's chamber, and the grand gallery all fit together like parts of a grand machine, built not for beauty, but for function. But function for what? That question has haunted researchers for decades, Traditional Egyptology teaches that the pyramids were tombs, eternal resting places for pharaohs, built to honor the dead. Yet no mummies were ever discovered inside the Great Pyramid itself. No hieroglyphs decorate its walls. There are no inscriptions naming the pharaoh who supposedly lay within. Instead, the interior feels mechanical, geometric, and strangely deliberate, like the interior of a device rather than a monument. Some engineers and physicists began to notice patterns that seemed to defy the simple tomb theory. The proportions of the chambers mirror mathematical ratios. The structure resonates at specific frequencies, and even the materials used, limestone, granite, and basalt, possess unusual electrical properties. Limestone, which covers the pyramid's outer casing, is an excellent insulator. The granite used in the king's chamber, on the other hand, is slightly conductive, containing high amounts of quartz and other crystalline minerals. When pressure or vibration is applied to quartz, it generates a small electrical charge, a property known as piezoelectricity. In the sealed heart of the pyramid, surrounded by massive stone blocks and the subtle hum of the earth itself, such materials could produce measurable energy effects. It's this curious blend of engineering, material science, and geometry that fuels what some call the energy hypothesis. According to this theory, the pyramid may have functioned not merely as a tomb, but as a kind of resonant energy structure designed to harness and amplify natural forces. The internal chambers and shafts, positioned with mathematical precision, could have served as conduits for vibration or resonance. The pyramid's shape itself, with its sharp apex and broad base, focuses energy toward the top, much like an antenna. Some researchers suggest it might have gathered electromagnetic energy from the Earth and atmosphere, concentrating it at specific points within. Others go further, imagining it as a wireless transmitter of power or a spiritual amplifier used in ancient rituals. Of course, mainstream scholars reject these ideas, arguing that the evidence supports a funerary function, not an energetic one. But the physical facts remain. The pyramid's design demonstrates knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and material properties far ahead of its time. Even if the energy hypothesis is wrong, it still forces us to confront the staggering precision and purpose behind the monument. How did builders of the Bronze Age measure the Earth's dimensions, align massive stones with stellar constellations, and design chambers that reflect acoustic and electromagnetic harmony? The pyramid seems to hum with intent, not just as a monument to death, but as an instrument of life and power. Its very stones echo with frequencies that modern instruments can still detect. Whether that energy was symbolic, spiritual, or physical, we may never know. What we can say for certain is that the Great Pyramid was more than a tomb. It was a statement, one carved in stone, geometry, and mystery. And so the question remains, echoing softly through the desert air: were the pyramids just tombs or ancient machines? Forgotten metallurgy, Damascus and Indian Wootz, steel among the many mysteries of lost ancient technology. Few are as sharp, elegant, and enduring as the blades forged from Damascus and Indian Wootz steel. These weapons weren't merely tools of war. They were works of art, living metal that seemed to hold secrets within their shimmering patterns. For centuries, travelers, soldiers, and historians told stories of swords so strong they could cut through lesser blades, so sharp they could slice a strand of silk falling through the air, and so resilient they could bend nearly double without breaking. Yet today, even with all our modern machinery and scientific understanding, we still struggle to reproduce the same results. What knowledge did the ancient blacksmiths possess that we have forgotten? The story begins not in the Middle East, but in ancient India, where the earliest form of this remarkable steel was born: Wootz steel. Produced as early as 300 BCE, it was created through a secret process that blended iron ore, charcoal, and glass inside sealed clay crucibles. When heated under carefully controlled conditions, the carbon from the charcoal infused the molten iron, producing a material both strong and flexible. When cooled, it formed a pattern of flowing waves, light and dark bands across the surface that became the trademark of blades forged from it. These ingots were exported across Asia, where they caught the attention of smiths from Persia, Arabia, and eventually Damascus. There the metal took on a new life, and a new legend was born. In Damascus, craftsmen transformed Wootz into swords that were more than weapons. They were symbols of mastery. Under the flickering light of their forges, they folded, hammered, and cooled the metal with rituals known only to a few. The exact temperatures, the timing, even the composition of the furnace atmosphere mattered. A single mistake could ruin the blade. Those who succeeded produced steel that seemed almost alive, its surface rippling with watery patterns known as damask. To the eyes of warriors and emperors, these blades weren't just deadly, they were divine. A Damascus sword could pierce armor where others failed. It could hold its edge through battle after battle, refusing to dull. Its beauty and strength gave rise to legends, poems, and envy across continents. When modern scientists finally examined surviving blades, the results were astonishing. Using electron microscopes, they discovered microscopic structures within the metal, carbon nanotubes and cementite nanowires that formed naturally during the ancient forging process. These patterns, unseen by the naked eye, are what gave Damascus steel its strength and flexibility. In essence, the ancient smiths had created nanostructured materials, centuries before the word nanotechnology even existed. The balance of carbon, the cooling rate, and the purity of the ingredients all contributed to the self-assembling patterns at the molecular level. It was a perfect marriage of art and science, achieved through experience, intuition, and secrets passed from master to apprentice. But somewhere along the line, that knowledge vanished. By the 18th century, the method of producing true Damascus and Wootz steel was lost. Trade routes shifted, resources changed, and the craftsmen who carried the secrets died without passing them on. The world moved forward with industrial iron and factory smelting, leaving behind the mystery of ancient blades that no modern process could replicate exactly. Scientists have tried, melting, mixing, experimenting, but the same texture, the same resilience, the same perfect harmony of strength and beauty eludes us. Each attempt comes close, but not close enough. The recipe is gone. What makes the loss so haunting is that it wasn't magic, it was knowledge. Knowledge refined over generations, guarded like treasure, and eventually erased by time. The patterns that once danced across those blades are like fingerprints of a forgotten genius, reminders of what human hands once knew by feel, not by formula. Even today, metallurgists continue to study ancient fragments, hoping to unlock the process that once allowed blacksmiths with no microscopes, no chemistry, and no equations to forge steel superior to almost anything made today. How did they do it? Did they stumble upon nanotechnology by accident, guided only by the rhythm of hammer and fire? Or did they understand something about material science that we still haven't rediscovered? The truth lies hidden in the lost forges of India and Damascus, buried beneath centuries of ash and silence. And that leaves us with one final lingering question. Did ancient smiths accidentally create nanotech? The great flood of knowledge throughout human history, we've built and lost more than we can ever count. Every few thousand years, a pattern seems to repeat itself. Civilizations rise, reach astonishing heights of knowledge and skill, and then fall into silence. Natural disasters, wars, plagues, and slow cultural decay erase what they once knew. Stone survives, but wisdom doesn't. The scrolls burn, the scholars die, the libraries turn to dust, and all that's left are fragments, strange, impossible artifacts scattered across time. We dig them up centuries later, bewildered by what we find, wondering how people from so long ago could have achieved what even we struggle to understand. Each artifact, the gears of the Antikythera Mechanism, the copper and iron of the Baghdad Battery, the perfect symmetry of the pyramids, the unbreakable blades of Damascus, speaks of a level of mastery that seems out of place. yet none of them exist in isolation. They hint at a larger story, one that connects the lost crafts and ideas of different ages and continents. It's as if human progress isn't a steady climb upward, but a series of forgotten peaks, each one reaching high, then collapsing under its own weight or swept away by catastrophe. Maybe the world we know today is just another chapter in a much older book, one we've been rewriting over and over again. When we look back, the evidence of brilliance is there, but the context is gone. We see fragments, gears, jars, blades, but not the people who made them. We know the what, but not the how or the why. The builders, the thinkers, the scientists of the ancient world left no blueprints, no instruction manuals, only whispers carved in stone and metal. And perhaps that's why every discovery feels like a message, half erased, half remembered, from a civilization that once stood where we do now, looking up at the same stars, wondering the same things. Maybe these were not miracles or accidents, but rediscoveries. Maybe humanity has risen to technological heights more than once, only to lose it all again, to flood, to fire, to war, to the passage of time. The knowledge that built machines beneath the sea, generated power from clay, carved stone with impossible precision, and forged steel at the molecular level may have vanished, waiting patiently to be remembered. If that's true, then our modern world isn't the beginning of civilization. It's a return, a rediscovery, a rebuilding of something that came before. We are walking the same path, holding torches in the dark, catching glimpses of light that once shone far brighter. The evidence is there, scattered but undeniable. We can touch the artifacts, but not the hands that made them. And as we uncover each piece, each gear, each blade, each forgotten secret, we are left with one haunting thought. What else have we mistaken for myth, simply because its technology was too advanced to believe? As the last echoes of history fade, one truth remains clear: our past was never simple. The deeper we dig, the more we uncover evidence that ancient civilizations were not primitive dreamers fumbling in darkness, but innovators, engineers, and thinkers who understood the world in ways we are only beginning to rediscover. From the gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the lost rivers of the Green Sahara, from Petra's hidden waterworks to the golden geometry of Silla's crowns, every artifact whispers the same message. Humanity's story is older, deeper, and far more advanced than we've been taught. Perhaps the greatest tragedy is not that these technologies were lost, but that we forgot to ask how they were ever known. Civilizations rise, they master the world around them, and then they vanish, leaving only fragments behind. And each time we find one, we're reminded that the line between myth and memory is thinner than we imagine. What other truths still sleep beneath deserts, oceans, and stone? Beneath deserts, oceans, and stone. If history has taught us anything, it's that knowledge is fragile. It can be erased by war, by time, or by arrogance. Yet it can also be rediscovered piece by piece by those willing to look beyond the accepted story. Because every relic, every ruin, every impossible artifact is a question, and the search for its answer is what keeps history alive. So as you step away from this journey through forgotten wonders, remember this: the past isn't finished speaking. We're just learning to listen again. If you enjoyed exploring the mysteries of lost civilizations and ancient technology, subscribe for more deep dives into history's forgotten truths. Like the video to help others discover these stories, and share it with someone who still believes we already know everything about our past, because the evidence buried beneath our feet tells a very different story. This is lost knowledge, where history remembers what time tried to erase.